Everyone, and first tonight, a ban on Hoosier drivers using cell phones, one of the top goals for Governor Holcomb next year. The list of his legislative priorities unveiled today includes raising the smoking age as well as holding teachers harmless for bad test scores. But it's the hands-free requirement that may be the biggest culture shift. Wish TV's Dan Klein joining us now. And Dan, the current law has been on the books for about a decade now.
Yeah, and certainly all it bans is texting while driving. So playing games, watching movies, checking Facebook is all allowed, but certainly not safe.
Right.
That all makes it difficult for police to enforce as well. We see it every day, probably about every time you go for a drive, which is why the governor says a change is needed. And as I went out with a trooper and a camera, it didn't take long.
So right now she's doing something on her phone.
It doesn't take long, just one stoplight.
She's more focused on the phone rather than whether or not the light is going to change.
It's something Senior Trooper Nick Klein camera sees all day, every day, whether stopped or even moving.
Right there. See her head movement? She's looking down, got the phone in her lap.
Which looks dangerous, but may not be a violation. No matter what they're doing, as long as they're not texting, no ticket. In 8 years of the law on the books, Klein Camera has written fewer than 10 tickets for use of a telecommunications device.
As we all know, it's happening all around you.
Oh yes, because again, we don't have the ability to check.
That's why he checks for all the other telltale signs of distracted driving instead. Weaving, not using a turn signal, crossing the center line, rather than trying to figure out if the driver is texting. It's looking festive on 465 near Keystone at rush hour. Lots of red lighting up the evening sky.
Whoop, there you go. Right there in the blue car.
Even as we sit, staring, camera rolling, oblivious to the trooper watching.
Now we're right next to her, looking at her, and she's still not seeing it. Trooper Klein Camera to State Police, ma'am, do you have your license, registration, and your proof of insurance, please?
The only driver he pulls over, unsafe lane movement, crossing the solid white lines into the on-ramp to avoid the long line of traffic. Just a warning this time before we find one more driver.
Oh yeah, looking down, looking up.
Going about a mile on I-69 on his phone, it sure looks like texting, but two quick lane changes before an exit, no lights and siren this time.
See, and that's the hard part, without being 100% sure.
Now, that's all in about an hour's worth of work. Of course, handheld cell phones aren't the only things that distract drivers. Senior Trooper Klein Camera also mentions eating, putting on makeup, and having a pet in your lap while driving, which are other things which can be major distractions he often sees. And Phil, according to the governor's Highway Safety Association, there are 21 states which have bans on cell phone use for drivers unless it's hands-free.
Dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
What do police think of the current law, Dan?
Well, it's one of those things where police talk to a few agencies. No one will go on camera with their opinion, but as you can see through this story, basically they say it's their job to enforce whatever laws are on the books, but it is a very difficult law as currently written to enforce because it's just tough to tell. Are they texting?
Yeah.
Are they using voice to text?
Especially with
are
the tinted windows.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a difficult law, and which is part of the reason why the governor's brought it up.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll stay on top of it.
Absolutely.
Dan, thank you very much. Interesting stuff.